The following program is a Town of Colonie television production of the William K. Sanford Town Library.
Well, welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time. This is our 5th show, and my name is Joe Nash, and I'm here with Zina Shevchik. We are both librarians here at the library, and in case you haven't seen our show before, this is what we do. This is our premise. We go down to the new bookshelf and our technical services department where they're processing all the brand new books, and we brought a bunch up to tell you about. And they're probably the kind of books that aren't on the bestseller list, or all the authors that everyone knows. So we're going to give you a good sampling of what the kind of things we have in our library, a small sampling, because every week when I do this, or every couple of weeks, I'm amazed at the subjects, how many books we have, and in the number of topics. It's totally amazing to me. So this is going to be a small sampling. So as usual, Zina will go first to tell us about our first book.
I agree with Joe. One of the joys of working in the library is to be able to see the scope of information and entertainment we have here in the library in the books. I chose as my first book the complete book of the Winter Olympics 2010 edition, which starts today in Vancouver. Today is Friday, February 12th. And opening ceremonies are tonight. And I like this book. It has the usual statistics and scores, but also has a lot of the stories, behind the stories, of a lot of the dramatic moments in past Olympics. And this is exclusive to the Winter Olympics. I think we have quite a few books on the Olympics in our collection, and I enjoyed reading in this particular book about the pair skating, which is what I enjoy watching, the skating, and the 2002 problem. There was an issue between the Canadian skaters and the Russian skaters in 2002, and whether the French judge was influenced or was in any way corrupted the scoring of their performances. And so there's a lot in this book, and it's very timely. 2010 edition of the complete book of the Winter Olympics.
Now, does that have history of the
Yes,
Winter?
it has a history. Yep, all the Winter Olympics.
Okay, now my first book, I'm actually in the middle of reading. And it's one of those books I can already tell, doesn't happen too often when you're an adult, but it's a book I don't want to end because it's so interesting. And it's called The Play That Changed My Life. The Play That Changed My Life. America's Foremost Playwrights on the Plays That Influenced Them. And I'm only about a third of the way through it, but it's actually wonderful. It's little essays, about, 7, 8 pages each, of these playwrights. You've probably heard of a lot of them: David Auburn, Christopher Durang, Horton Foote, Charles Fuller, A.R. Gurney, Beth Henley, Donald Margolis, Sarah Rule, John Patrick Shanley, Doug Wright. I think there's about 20 different current playwrights talking about, and the question for their essay was the play that changed your life, obviously the title. But the way they write about these plays is and you really get a sense of why they love the theater, why they've devoted their life to the theater. And the funny thing about the ones I've read so far is it isn't like they've all saw King Lear and were totally blown away or something like that. They're plays that you wouldn't think, they're not famous or anything, some of them, but one guy talks about, I forgot who, when he was a kid in the early 60s, seeing How to Succeed in Business Without Trying, or something like that. And he just talks about how it totally enthralled him, and he became a playwright. And so it really comes through this book why all these people have devoted their life to theater. And there's wonderful stories in here, not just about the one play. A lot of it's about being in the theater. And as you know, I spend my summer vacation for a week going to plays for one straight week. So I really love the theater, and this book is really great if you love theater. So The Play That Changed My Life. Zina?
Okay. My next book is a biography of James Naismith, who is regarded as the inventor of the sport or the game of basketball. And this caught my eye because I actually went, when I was getting my master's degree, one of my fellow students was one of the granddaughters of James Naismith, and I had never heard of James Naismith. I've mentioned before that I'm not a sports fan, and so this was something that caught my eye because I knew his name. He developed the game in Springfield, Massachusetts, in our backyard, and the Basketball Hall of Fame is in Springfield. I think it's called the Hall of Fame. And he was working, James Naismith was working at the YMCA. It was a kind of a headquarters in Springfield, Massachusetts, and he developed the game in 1891 he was given the task of developing a game that students could play in the winter time. And a big part of the YMCA philosophy or mission is the development of sports and keeping your body healthy. And he came from Canada, and he went to McGill University in Canada, and he had intended to be a minister and perhaps a doctor. And he was a very good athlete at McGill, and he was a very moral person, they say, and he played straight, and he loved athletics and decided to devote his life to that. After he left the YMCA, he went to the University of Kansas, and he developed their first basketball program too. So it's all about his life, and it's written by, co-authored by one of his other granddaughters. So James Naismith, the man who invented basketball. Joe?
Okay, now one of the most popular genres in the last 5 or 6 years is graphic novels. And now it's going out to, people are writing graphic memoirs. And if you don't know what they are, it's obviously, people think comic book, but it's not really a comic book, but it's stories with art to it. And you may know the book called Maus, M-A-U-S, which is Art Spiegelman's memoir of his father and the Holocaust, which is a very famous graphic work.
That was kind of the first.
It was one of the first ones, yes,
yeah.
for adults. Now, a lot of people think these are just for kids, Batman, Superman, but for example, I think a year or two ago, the Pulitzer Prize for Memoir went to a book called Fun Home, which was a graphic memoir. And here's the new graphic memoir. Hope you can see it. It's called Stitches by David Small. David Small is a very famous children's book author, or book illustrator. And this is a memoir of him growing up in Detroit, I think in the 50s and 60s. But his family, he had sort of a dysfunctional family. His father was a doctor, and the author, David Small, had some respiratory problems. I think he may have had asthma. But his father, for some reason, treated him with radiation. He thought that would help him. But it turns out when David Small was 14, his parents said, you're going to go have an operation on your throat or something. And he wakes up from it, and he couldn't speak and all this. But it turns out that he had cancer of something like that, and they're not sure if the radiation caused it, but they never told him that he had cancer. He didn't find out till years later. So anyway, and his parents sort of had a dysfunctional marriage, and so this is his memoir about growing up with this, and he tells it in the graphic arts form, and it's some of these pictures. It's very haunting if you really go through this book, and he's a lot of dark shadows and stuff, but I haven't read it, but it got really great reviews as one of the best I keep saying graphic novel, it's a graphic memoir, because it's true. And it just looks really interesting, and one of the great things about these kind of books, all the artists are so different, the art really adds to the story. In fact, I was going to bring up the show, but it was checked out. R. Crumb has a new retelling, I shouldn't say retelling, he uses the Bible, the book of Genesis, illustrated. It's absolutely unbelievable. but I couldn't.
In graphic form.
In graphic form, the Book of Genesis by R. Crumb. If you know R. Crumb, you'd know who I'm talking about.
Spell his last name, do you know?
C-R-U-M-B.
C-R-U-M-B.
So anyway, this book has gotten some great reviews, and like I say, the art is very, very haunting. Maybe you can sort of see that in there. It's really pretty amazing. And the artist, like I say, the author is a very famous children's illustrator. So it's called Stitches by David Small.
We're a very visual society now with the internet and the TV. And
Well, that's why I think these graphic novels are so
yeah.
popular.
Right, that's what I was thinking too, is that maybe that's...
But now it's going out into, like I say, these people are writing memoirs and nonfiction. There's a lot of nonfiction books. There was that book, Persepolis. The woman from Iran wrote about her life growing up during the Islamic Revolution in a graphic form that just got wonderful reviews. I think they made a movie out of it. So
Now these are cataloged, they're kept in...
this one's up with the biographies.
So the graphic works aren't in one area.
Most graphic works are in the same spot, but this is technically, it's his biography, so it's up with the biographies. So.
All right. My next book is something that's an area, it's in our area. It's called Remarkable Service, A Guide to Winning and Keeping Customers for Servers, Managers, and Restaurant Owners, and it's by the Culinary Institute of America, which its main school and is in Hyde Park in the Hudson Valley. And I've done my stint in my early years as a waitress, and I also was a restaurant manager for a while. And so I enjoyed looking at this book. It covers everything. It includes lots of pictures. It has explanation of the different kinds of service, French service, Russian service. It has pictures of all the different kinds of glasses to use to serve appropriate for each beverage. It gives tips on how to maintain a reservation system, what to say to customers if you can't give them a table when they're expecting one. And it's very practical, but it also has it has a nice glossary that gives it gives definitions of all sorts of kinds of cooking processes. I was recently on a cruise where we dined every night, and I didn't understand most of the menu, so this was this would have been handy. And it also has a couple of recipes in the back, which is really nice. So this is considered the premier guide to service and hospitality. So everybody's trying to stay in business these days, so the extra service might make the difference. So the Culinary Institute's Remarkable Service. Joe?
I didn't know you were a waitress at one time.
Oh,
Zina,
yes.
I know.
Oh, yes.
Okay, here's a book. Again, I keep saying getting good reviews because, as I mentioned in the earlier shows, our occupational hazard is we have to read a lot of book reviews. So here's one that I read many very good reviews on. It's called Dancing in the Dark, A Cultural History of the Great Depression. I think most of us think of the 1930s as not just the era of the Depression, but as an era of perhaps maybe not much going on in the arts. But Morris Dickstein, who wrote this book, talks about all the arts, music, literature, theater, architecture, films of the 1930s, and contrary to popular belief, judging by the reviews and just looking at this book, it really looks really good. It turns out the 1930s were one of the most remarkable artistic periods in all arts, films, music, literature, and this book sort of goes through. It's a cultural, like I say, a cultural history of the Great Depression. It probably should be more a cultural history of the 1930s because that's when it takes place, but I don't know how much the Depression has to do with this, other than the Depression was going on at the time. But this book got really good reviews, and it looks very fascinating book. So this is called Dancing in the Dark, A Cultural History of the Great Depression by Morris Dickstein. Zina?
Yeah, so many books. So
I know.
little time. I mean, that's really how we feel. It's like browsing in a...
I mean, who would have thought a book about the cultural history of the 30s would be so fascinating, but it's getting good reviews.
It's true. This is one of the, let's see, one of the reviewers called this the book no parent wants to have any reason to read. It's called When Kids Get Arrested, What Every Adult Should Know. I mean, it's just something different that my eye caught. It caught my eye, excuse me, and it's written by a lawyer who is a juvenile defense attorney and a founder of the Children's Justice Clinic at Rutgers University. And it covers a great deal in here, and one of the more interesting things is right at the very beginning, it says, it has one page, and it says, if you only have 5 minutes, top 10 tips, what every adult should know to protect a child from the juvenile justice system. And I think some of them are I think most of us might know, but some of them aren't. The first one is don't ever allow police to question a child without a lawyer. Don't ever let a child waive the right to a lawyer. But this I didn't know. Juvenile records count. They do not disappear when a child turns 18. For some reason, I thought that was standard, that they were sealed, and when a child turned 18, any record you have might disappear. The other thing is, it says that the juvenile justice system has become much more punitive since the mid-1990s, and she says it's not a solution to school mental health or defiant problems with your children. It has a section on school search issues, meaning what rights your child has in the school system. She says that children have fewer legal rights while in school. School officials don't need a search warrant to search a student's purse, backpack, locker, or desk, and schools can perform random drug tests before allowing students to participate in extracurricular activities. It also has a section on when children get suspended or expelled, school discipline issues. So it's something that you as a parent might want to just take a look at it, particularly as there seems to be a spate of younger children getting taken to task and put in the juvenile justice system, even when they're young, if they say the wrong thing, or to a boy says the wrong thing to a girl, even if they're in elementary school, or if a child might threaten another in fun or not knowing what they're saying. The tendency, according to this book, is even for schools to get the court system or the juvenile justice system involved much more than used to be, where the school systems used to try to handle the incidents within the school and the family. So when kids get arrested, What Every Child Should Know by Sandra Simpkins.
What grade? What age is that book?
Under
about?
18.
Under 18, okay. Well, my next book, I have to reach across the table here. When we pick our books out to talk about, we do this a few days ago so we can look through them and, sort of be prepared. I picked this near the end of the day, so I must have been hungry, but it's called The New Appetizer. And it's just an example. Peggy Mello orders cookbooks for she's one of the librarians here, and our cookbook section, I have to say, is excellent.
Absolutely.
It really is. So this is Taste of Home, The New Appetizer, 230 recipes for today's party starters. But once you look through some of these, asparagus ham spirals, Korean wontons, Southwestern appetizer triangles, and the pictures are just mouth-watering. But it makes you want to have a whole meal out of some of these. Pizza turnovers, bite-sized crab quiche, party pesto pinwheels.
That sounds
So anyway, there's great pictures.
Party pesto.
And they have different turkey tortilla spirals. There's a lot of spirals in here. I think there's a whole chapter on wraps or something. But just one bandito chicken wings. Cranberry meatballs and sausage. So you get the idea. Sweet and sour sausages. I never heard of sweet and sour sausage. But anyway, this is just one example of our great cookbook section here at the library. And this is called The New Appetizer, 230 recipes for today's party starters. But they look so good, you might want to make a whole meal out of.
Yeah, these aren't your mother's cookbooks.
No.
And they, my mother would be, she thought I read cookbooks now, and I was able to cook when I was married, and I really enjoy all
Yes,
of our
this is not
cookbook
just,
collection.
this isn't the Fannie Farmer.
A lot of pictures and great big type, and it's wonderful. They're just fun even to browse. It's a dream.
Okay.
My next book is The Next 100 Million, America in 2050 by Joel Kotkin. And he's anticipating, trying to anticipate where the 100 million more Americans that apparently are going to populate our country by 2050 will live.
100 million more, he's saying?
100 million more by 2050. That's 40 years. And we're at 300 million?
310, I think I just read the other day.
So he's trying to anticipate some of the repercussions, consequences of our growing population. He, in the reviews I read, apparently he's much more optimistic generally about our country and what's going to happen in our country in the next 40 years. Yes, this was written during and after the economic upheaval we experienced and are still experiencing. He says that we're in a really good place, Americans, because the other developed countries do not have the same growing population that we do. And he says that that's going to keep our country strong, economically strong, and very vibrant. And he said Russia their population is aging and dramatically, and they have very little population growth. And even in China, he said 30% of the Chinese population is going to be, I think, over 60 or 65 by 2050. I didn't get the statistic for the United States, but I know that it's much less than that. He doesn't think that people are going to live in the cities, which is what other books have been saying as well. In contrast, he thinks they're going to be moving out to the old suburbs around big cities and trying to develop small communities. But he said it's still going to be an automobile-based society. There's lots of interesting things in here. I really enjoy reading about the future, maybe particularly when I'm not going to be here.
Well, is he predicting,
what I'm going to miss?
Is he predicting a bigger birth rate or more immigrants?
He said both.
Okay.
Both. He said by 2050, most it's going to be only 50% or less are going to be whites. The biggest population boom is Hispanics and Asians, and I know I've been hearing about the Hispanics population. So it's going to be a different kind of America, different color, but he thinks that people are going to stay away from the cities because they are more interested in community than anything else. And he said it's very hard unless the cities make a real effort to develop communities, smaller communities within them, that people are still going to go out to the suburbs. So the next 100 million, America in 2050.
Well, with all these new growing population, this author is predicting maybe something we need, the age of empathy. He actually predicts the future as going to be with more empathy, but I'll just tell you about it. The subtitle is called Nature's Lessons for a Kinder Society, and it's written by the very famous primatologist, Frans de Waal. He's a Dutch-born biologist and primatologist. And he wrote a fascinating book. He's written many fascinating books, I shouldn't say. I read one last year called Our Inner Ape. And he talks about bonobos and the great chimps and chimpanzees and our kinship with humans. So his new book, The Age of Empathy, is all about, a lot of people think survival of the fittest with evolution, but he actually thinks the more he has studied primates, this is about all animals too, that empathy really comes naturally to a great variety of animals, including humans. And this book goes all through some of his later studies with different animals. But again, I think he mainly concentrates on the primate family and then, in humans. So it looks really good. He's a great writer. He takes all these complicated scientific things and he really makes it understandable. And we're going to have this book talked about at our noon book review in either May or June. So if you see this on in the future, look in our TV station or our newsletter. We're going to have someone come and talk about this book in May or June, and her name is Sherry Lyons, and she's an author, and she's currently writing a book about evolution. And she's written a book. She's written a biography of Thomas Huxley, and she's written a book about science in the Victorian era in England. So that should be really good. So look for this book in our noon book review, but until then you can read it. The Age of Empathy, Nature's Lessons for a Kinder Society by Franz de Waal.
Okay, my next book is called Boston Noir. It's a collection of crime fiction, and this collection is edited by Dennis Lehane. It's part of a series, Joe told me before we started this taping. We have, these are crime fiction with the common setting of Boston. And we also have one of the series in our library called Delhi Noir, which is, the Indian city of Delhi. And there exists Brooklyn Noir that other libraries in our system have. And this one is reviewed, outstanding reviews. I read about what noir is supposed to be, and in the genre of crime detection, and it says it's where the main character is kind of everyday man or woman, and it sounds like it kind of the person is usually overtaken by his own inadequacies or ineptitude, and how life just kind of becomes a real tragedy for them. Now, all the settings are in Boston, and a lot of the jargon, the way of speaking, is related to the Bostonians. And similarly, I guess in the Delhi and the Boston and the Brooklyn collection,
who are some of the authors?
Peculiar. Yeah, I'll read
Okay.
them. Maybe you'll know them. I don't know them. Stewart, besides Dennis Lehane, and he wrote Mystic River, in case anyone has seen the movie or read the book, and he has a short story in here, and I really enjoyed it. Stuart Onan, Patricia Powell, John Dufresne, Lynn Heitman, Don Lee, Russ Aborn, Jim Fusilla, Brendan Dubois, Dana Cameron. That sounds familiar to me. I like crime fiction, any kind of mystery detective, so I'm going to try this, Boston Noir, and I recommend it.
Okay, here's a very practical book. Again, a lot of our nonfiction books are on the practical side, not just history and biographies. This is a very common kind of book people come into the library for. It's called 101 Law Forms for Personal Use. It has a CD in the back. I think you can print forms off them. But it has very simple legal forms that you can use. For example, landlord-tenant, child care agreement, elder care agreement, simple will, promissory note, a lease, pre-lawsuit demand letter. I'm not sure what that is. A pre-lawsuit demand letter, accident claim. And again, we got a lot of books like this in the library, a lot of reference books if you just want to come in and make if you need a quick legal form. So it's just one example. 101 law forms for personal use.
And we usually we often have those kinds of books. We have a reference copy and a circulating copy. Usually that's what we do with those kind of popular, high in demand books. My next book is called The Forensic Science of CSI, the television show of the same name. And this is the third title we have by this author about CSI, Catherine Ramsland. And it's written in a very entertaining way, but they're saying that a lot of the science that's presented in the shows, the CSI, Miami, CSI, New York, CSI Las Vegas.
Oh, there's too many
Have
of
I
them
got it
to
right?
remember.
I think I've only seen lately the Las Vegas and New York ones. I'm not sure if the Miami one is still around. That a lot of the science that is presented on the CSI shows is real science. And she does a great job of bringing up cases on the shows and as examples, starting with them and including them in her discussions about different kinds of procedures and the kind of testimony that has to be presented by the CSI investigators and scientists. And she also intersperses her discussions with real crime, like she mentions, I just lost it. Never mind. Sorry, I just forgot. My mind just went blank. But she does present real-life cases in between, as well as the CSI cases, in describing the science as presented on the show,
Okay,
CSI.
well, I think we have time for one more. As usual, I'm looking down here to all the books I didn't pick. We didn't get to all the books. The Tyranny of Email, The World Without Bees. But maybe next time we'll talk about it. But I'll just finish up with this one because I love the format. The format is oral biography. If you don't know what an oral biography is when an author interviews hundreds of people about the subject, and then he sort of divides it up into topics with quotes from all the different people. And I've read many oral biographies. It's a really great format. And this is an oral biography of the director, Robert Altman, the oral biography by Mitchell Zukoff. But he interviewed hundreds of people, not just actors, people on the, let's see, not just actors, but it's his family, friends, it says a few enemies, agents, writers, crew members, producers, stars, such as Meryl Streep, Warren Beatty, Tim Robbins, Julianne Moore, Paul Newman, etc. And if you're a big fan of Robert Altman's movies like MASH, McCabe and Mrs. Miller, Nashville, Gosford Park, Shortcuts, etc., he really made movies differently than a lot of directors. He used a lot of improvisational style, and so the actors and everyone talks about what it was like to work with him. So if you're interested in Robert Altman and his movies and how movies were made, I think from the 70s, in the 70s on, when movies did change a lot, there's tons and tons of interviews in here by different categories, and I think each movie has a little chapter, and they talk about what it was like working with Robert Altman, who's considered really one of the great modern Hollywood directors. So this is Robert Altman, the oral biography by Mitchell Zukoff. So that is it for today, show 5, So Many Books, So Little Time, and we'll see you next time.